like to call to order the May 21st, 2020 regular meeting of the Strongsville City Schools Board of Education. Mr. Anagnostou, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Bissell?
Here.
Mr. Grozen is not here today because of a prior commitment.
Mr. Rico?
Here?
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mrs. Hausman?
Here.
Full present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda are district goals. We have 3 goals: academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, community engagement. And I think it goes without saying that the COVID-19 pandemic is challenging all 3 of those goals, but we will rise to the occasion. Next on our agenda is public comment. Let's see if we have any on the Cameron, I have the form up. Do you have the spreadsheet up?
I do.
Are there any public comments?
Yes, there are. From Judy Tarr. Question on grade school distance learning. Are these assignments being graded, or if assignment is completed, credit is awarded regardless of any wrong answers or errors made?
Do you want to go ahead, Cameron, and answer that?
Sure. For our elementary school remote learning program, it is completion for the assignment. So the rule is that the students have an English language arts and a mathematics tic-tac-toe board. We're highly encouraging, it's not required, but we're highly encouraging families to submit the center square from each board as well as 2 additional squares of their choosing. Once they submit that, the teachers will give feedback and they will mark in the grade book that it was completed. So an accuracy rating percentage is not there. It's just, was it submitted, was it completed, yes or no. There will be no trimester 3 mark on the report card, so it is just strictly whether it was completed or not, but it's just a management tool to see which students are engaging in remote learning and which are not. It's not going to count negatively towards any student from K to 5 as well as preschool on any report card.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have there were 4 separate submittals from Madison, Begany, what was it? Begany. Thank you, Jenny. If the school year starts back up in the fall and the virus is still going on and your child has a health condition, may they do work from home, get the work from their teachers so they are safe and not in the open?
I think a lot of those kinds of questions we're working through as we speak. We've started some work groups to determine how we can do that, but I think it's fair to say to be decided. Do you have any other comments, Cameron?
No, I think that covers it. The same person submitted 3 others, and I'll put these all together. Can you guys send something out for senior photos? Will you guys send out anything about parking passes for the high school next year? And will kids get their yearbooks this year? Sounding like this is a high school parent, yes, yearbooks will be out. Yearbooks usually come out in August because they're still doing things for spring sports. So yes, yearbooks, if you purchase a yearbook, they would still be available. You can. Oh, they're going to mail it to, thank you, Laura, Ms. Hausman. They're going to mail them to your home. So yes, you'll still get yearbooks. In terms of parking passes, that will happen at a different time. And as Mr. Micko said, we'll work through those details and communicate the alternative plan for those. And senior photos, I'll share that with the high school in terms of any information that they have that they can put on the website or put in one of the updates.
And then the last question is by Rick on Wolf Run. And it's still loading on my laptop. What's his question?
If we miss the locker cleanout date at the middle school, can we reschedule another time? Please just contact the building administration, Mr. Marino, Ms. Peters, Ms. Bailey, Yes, they will work with you to find a time to come clean out if you are unable to come this past week. So just give them a call or an email, and they'll work with you to get the items. And I'd just like to say at this time, at our buildings, our elementary buildings, we still have a number of schools that have a number of bags left because families have not picked those up yet. Our building administration has been making phone calls to those families to remind them. So as a reminder, every elementary classroom, we bagged up their belongings, put a label on it, and so we want to make sure that all of that gets back to the rightful owner. So if you're an elementary parent or a preschool parent and did not go to the school at all to pick up your child's belongings, please also contact the school, and they will find a time for you to come and pick up the belongings so you can have those moving forward. And that's it for public comment.
And I'm guessing you did not see anyone in the lobby, George?
No, I did not.
Okay, moving next to recognition. We do not have any, but I do want to, I will steal some of Mrs. Pelko's thunder, and this would be our retirement recognition, so I'm sure we'll have a few comments later today. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes, April 2nd, regular Board of Education meeting, April 16th, regular Board of Education meeting. All district and video recordings will be a permanent part of the minutes, and they're available on our website. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Mr. Anagnostou.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
George, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I have a few items for your consideration tonight. The first being is the 5-year forecast, which can be found in Exhibit A. I also have the presentation on the board and also have a copy of the presentations for you, as well as the copy of the exhibit. And for everyone at home, it is now on the website as well. So if you would like a copy of it, it's out on the website. The 5-year forecast is required to be presented to the board biannually, at least once in November, and then again in May. The one in November is tied to our annual budget, as that's the same time we approve our annual budget. And the forecast in May is for the current fiscal year, it's updated based on the trends that we're seeing and starting the process to build next year's budget as well. And the out years are based on budgeted years. The forecast is subject to change as our assumptions are based on the best knowledge that we have at the time we build the forecast. And as we go from November to May and May to November, things change. And as this year, quite a lot of things changed that changed the forecast drastically from the previous forecast. And with the assumptions, I was going to touch on it at the end, but a lot of, with this year's assumptions compared to previous years, there's a lot of unknowns that we had to take our best guess at. There's a lot of speculation regards of property tax collection, state funding, where we just had to come up with our best estimates. The contents of the presentation contains the major assumptions, the general fund revenues, expenditures, and the summary at the end. The major assumptions for revenues, our collection rate in the past for calendar year 16 was 99.8, 17 98.80, 18 98.89, and last year 100.2. If you ask how can it be 100.2, it's because of delinquencies. So this is I should back up, this is the gross collection rate, which includes our delinquency. So the number of bills that got sent out, the number of invoices that got paid, plus delinquencies that got accounted for, it goes into the gross collection rate. So our historical average is 99.3 for the second half of this calendar year. So for calendar year 2020, the bills are collected in the first half of the year, then again the second half. For the first half, the bills were collected prior to the pandemic. So the second half is still what's outstanding. So the county already sent out the bills, are collected in July, August, and now they pushed their collection date back by a month. So we'll receive our settlement by September 30th. What I assumed in the forecast is a 3.5% decrease in the gross collection rate. 1% represents about $450,000. Where I got to 3.5 is I went back and looked at the gross collection rates over the past 10 years. And that was our lowest in the past 10 years, which was close to the 2008, between 2008 and 2012 during the housing decline. So that's how I came to that number. Any change from there, it's a variable of almost $500,000. So for this year, for the second half, I decreased by 3.5, but if you annualize that number, because already half the year has passed, it's 1.75% decrease for calendar year 2020. Then in fiscal year 21, I should say calendar year 21, next calendar year, I increased the percent the 3.5 decrease by percentage to a decrease of 2.5% from our average. And then in calendar year 2020, I normalized the collection rate back to the 99.3, but then accounted for that we would start collecting the delinquencies from this past year for the anticipated year of the second half of 2020 and 21. So in calendar year 2022 and 2023, I increased the rate for the delinquencies, and then 24, I normalized it back to the average. Evaluations, I kind of went with the trends with the evaluations as it covered that period of time. The evaluations changed based on county revisions, and then also any new construction and demolitions that come off the books. And then with the forecast, with our tax revenues, there's 2 renewal levies, one that was renewed in 2016. It was a 5-year, $6 million levy, which will expire in December 31st, 2021, and collections will continue through December 31st, 2020. So next November 21, will be our first time we can try and renew it, and we'll have till November of 2022 to have it renewed. And then in May of 2019, residents approved a 5-year, $5.9 million levy with collections beginning this past January, and the forecast will assume the levy will expire in December 23 with collections going through December 2024. So we received half of the revenue collections this year, and then the remaining half we'll receive next year, which will be annualized. State revenues, current for fiscal year 20, based on the recent news, our state funding for this year was reduced by 20%, or $1.6 million. Revenues of the 9.1. For the remaining fiscal years, I already had built in a 5% reduction in state revenue for the 2023 biennium and the 2024 biennium, based on the state funding guarantee that we've been reduced in the past. I have kept that 5% reduction in there, and then I added an additional 20% for next fiscal year. And then our casino revenues are included in the state funding as well. And with casinos being closed, I zeroed out the casino revenues for 21 and 22. If the casino's open, there'll be a chance we get that back, but since it's only $300,000 in the grand scheme of things, I zeroed it out until we have, and anything we get above that will be a bonus. And then in 2022, I restored 10% of the 20% reduction of state funding, and then also the 5% that was already in there for the funding guarantee for that biennium. And then in 23, I restored the remaining 10%, and then 24 back to 100%. And this 20%, it's speculation. They reduced us 17%. The hope is that for this upcoming year, they reduce us the same at least the same percentage or less than we got this year, hopefully not more. But at this point, no one really knows for sure where the state's heading. So we should find out more news hopefully over the summer. I think the state has to pass their budget by July 1. So even during a biennium year, that's right around the time we find out what our state funding is going to be. Expenditures, based on the early estimates, staffing is increased by 4 positions, and 3 of those, we have 3 literacy coaches that are on a federal grant that'll be coming on the general fund next year. We're trying to get that grant extended 1 more year, so that may not be the entire 4, and then the additional 1 was various positions that netted out to an additional position. The forecast assumes all union agreements as currently defined. Healthcare, for next fiscal year, we're going to see a 3% increase, and then for fiscal years 22 to 24, I have an annual increase of 8%, which is an industry standard. Even for this year, our increase was closer to was a little over 5%, but since we had savings in our self-insurance fund, we were able to utilize some of the reserve that's in there to offset the increase. And then unemployment costs, although we've been saving on sub costs, some of our subs have been filing for unemployment, which is starting to come in, and I increased the unemployment budget by $90,000, which accounts for 6 months, based on the current estimates we're getting now. Trends from the previous forecast up until now. Our revenues were projected at $78 million. Currently, the revenues are $78.9 million as they're trending, for an additional $893 revenue above the forecast. The majority of it is from the local tax collections, was a little bit higher for the first half of calendar year 2020 than anticipated. Net of the state funding loss that we received of the $1.6 million, and also net of additional all other revenue of the $1.8, where that was accounted for. We received $700,000 in prior refunds between the county and the Bureau of Workers' Comp, and then the TIF agreements that we've had as well throughout the year. Expenditures. The 5-year forecast in November anticipated expenditures to be $74.8 million. Currently, they're trending at $72.1 million, about 3.6 million, or about 3.6% under the forecast, and it's made up by a few items. For salaries and benefits, we had about $400,000 due to open positions, $500,000 in savings due to substitutes, overtime, supplementals, and merit pay, $200,000 in savings in healthcare plans due to change in enrollment, and then $100,000 savings in the workers' comp premium rebate adjustment. And then in purchase services, we're realizing savings for outside tuition, and then $300,000 in savings due to contracted services due to the school shutdown, and then $200,000 in legal expenses. So overall, we're trending about $2.7 million under, or 3.6% under the forecast. And how that impacts the fund balance, or the cash balance. We projected the cash balance for this fiscal year to end $3.2 million, but due to the additional revenues and savings in the current budget, we're able to add another $3.6 million for additional $6.8 million above the revenues above the, an additional 3.5 or $6.8 million in cash to their cash balance. General fund revenues. Local taxes make up the majority of the budget at 72.6% or $57 million, followed by state funding, and then the state reimbursements, TIF revenues, and all other revenues, which is made up of interest, outside tuition, preschool, kindergarten tuition, pay-to-play, Medicaid, and catastrophic cost reimbursement. Property tax revenues. We saw an increase from 19 to 20. It's because of the levy going into effect. And then in 20 to 21, it's net of the second half levy going into effect and the decrease of the collection rate. Moving on to, going back to state revenue or property tax revenues, then as you'll see in the chart in the red, that's where the renewal levy kind of drops off in the outer years. State foundation revenue, as you can see there, we've saw a decline in state funding. From 17, we had the TPP supplement, what's in red, and then our core aid has been pretty much consistent up until last month, where we saw it drop from altogether with things outside with the foundation funding of 9.1 and the other items such as the casino made up 9.7 million down to 7.9 million. And then in 21, estimating with a 20% reduction, 7.6, restoring 10% in 2022, 8.1, and then in 2023, back to the normal amount plus the 5% reduction of the guarantee, and same in 24. The state hold harmless reimbursements, property tax allocations, those are the homestead and rollback, and these have been consistent throughout the years. And the red in 23 and 24 is due to the renewal levy. All other revenue is made up of the TIFs that were in the blue bar, and then the other revenues that are in the red bars. The other revenues are going to decrease, are projected to decrease from 2020 to 2021 by 1.3 million, which is primarily due to the refunds that we received this year of 700,000. Interest revenue, due to the market conditions, current year interest, we're trending about 700,000, and the forecast I have built in 300,000. In kindergarten tuition, I made an estimate that it's going to be less than this year based on the unknown of next, still to be determined. Any questions on revenues before expenditures? Expenditures, where does our money go? 81.4%, or 58.7 million, goes into salaries and benefits. That's, as we're people industry, that's where majority of our budget is in salaries and benefits. And then purchase services, material supplies, equipment, and other objects. Salaries are projected to increase by 5.67% from this year to next year, and it's due to a combination of items such as adding back the savings for this year and then our negotiated agreements for the step and COLA increases. And then each year's, the projected trend is based on the COLA and step increases. Benefits, the biggest chunk within the benefits is healthcare costs, and the increase for healthcare costs from this year to next year is the 3% increase, plus adjusting for any savings that was received this year, and then SCRS and STRS will increase slightly based as their percentage of salaries, and they'll increase along with the salaries. Purchase services, the biggest chunk of the purchase services is tuition to other districts. This year, we're paying out about 3.3 million in tuition. Next year, we're anticipate about 4 million, and the increases are based on the following. $200,000 increase in charter school deduction, which has been the annual estimate, or annual trend. 200,000 for our special ed tuition and settlements, 100,000 for college credit plus based on prior estimates. And then there's also 230,000 additional from prior years for the scholarship due to St. Joseph and John's being under the Peterson agreement. So if, depending on how many kids sign up for that agreement under SJJ, that number could go down. And all other purchase services that make up the green bar are based on our contractual services such as nurses, North Coast Therapy, Solutions Behavior, suburban transportation. This year we realized the savings due to the shutdown, as we're currently not, they're not working, they're not being paid. Materials and supplies, this makes up about 1.8 million of the spend this year. Next year it's projected to go up 400,000, and the difference is the textbooks. This year and last year, they didn't, we didn't use 100% of the budget, so it's restoring the budget back to 100%. And then other objects, transfers and advances. This year we're projecting about 2.5 million, and again for next year, 2.5 million. The biggest two items here are transfers to other funds, and what the transfers are for is for the food service. So the general fund needs to cover any deficits in other funds. So annually there's a transfer to food service to cover that deficit. Based on the school shutdown this year, it was anticipated to be about 250,000 For this year, I have estimated now to be about 450,000, and then dropping it back down to 250 next year. Again, I don't know what food service is going to look like next year, so it's just an estimate, and depending on how food service will be, it may need to be adjusted. Termination benefits, we have what's called a Fund 35. When an employee retires, they're paid out their severance, and that severance is paid out of that fund. That fund doesn't have any revenue. The revenue is a transfer from the general fund into that account. The reason we pay it out of that account, those dollars don't hit our per pupil expenditure costs when it's reported at the state. So that's the purpose of why it's expended in that fund. This year, it's estimated to be about 510,000. Next year, with the number of retirements, it's about 625. Then the following years, I bumped it back down to 500,000. And then in the red bars, the 1.2 million, the biggest chunk there is about 900,000 for county auditor fees. So when the county collects their taxes, they deduct about 1% of what's collected, and they keep it as their fees for collecting our taxes. And that's it with expenditures. So general fund summary, so there's two charts. One, when I report the forecast to the state, with the renewal levy coming off, I have to show it being reduced from revenues and then added to the bottom to the cash balance. Just so the forecast flows nicer, I'm going to go to the second chart that keeps the renewal, assumes the renewal levy is part of the revenues. So due to the additional savings we were able to realize this year, net of the state funding reductions, our revenues over expenses is about 6.7 million. And although we are being hit with a pandemic, with the recent passage of the levy, currently we're trending in a good, we're in a good financial condition compared to a lot of our peers. We have a good cash balance that we're able to weather the storm. We're able to weather the storm if it lasts for a couple of years, and if hopefully we get back to normal sooner than later. Still, as I mentioned earlier, there's still future potential impacts, as some of the assumptions were just speculations. For example, tax collections could change, reductions in state funding can change, staffing can change. Mr. Rybo is going to present something in his presentation about workflow groups and how school might look like next year, so that's all dependent on what our staffing is going to look like. So there's a lot of things that are still unknown, and when I present this back in November, hopefully we have a little bit clearer picture. So that's all I had with the, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? So I do want to share with the public, first of all, thank you to George. We have spoken quite a few times in the evening for the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. Normally I feel bad because normally I'm interrupting, but you've done a lot of work on this 5-year forecast for obvious reasons to try to get our hands around what we expect to deal with. I do want to caution that although it seems at this point in time this year was a financial benefit, it comes at a cost. And I think all of our parents and all of our students understand that cost. And those dollars, I don't see them as, saved dollars. I see them as opportunities that we're putting a dollar amount to, and I have a feeling that in the next couple of years, we're going to need to adjust to make up for some of those lost opportunities. Depending on what the future holds, we may need more technology services. We may need more personnel services in different ways. So we're earmarking those saved dollars to right the ship, so to speak, in the future. We in Strongsville are in a good position to weather the storm, to use that as a phrase. So we owe our thanks to the taxpayer and to the community for putting us in this position. George used the word speculation, and I don't like the word speculation so much because it seems like a guess. We made the best predictions we could make that were as reasonable as we could make. We didn't say that state funding is going to go to zero. That's not reasonable. We didn't say that state funding was going to stay exactly the same. That's not reasonable. So we did our best bet, our best prediction, and I think 20% is a reasonable amount. I don't want to steal anyone's report, but I saw City Council, they're looking at a 20% reduction in personnel costs across the board. So there's some reasonableness to it. I think over the summer, in the next 4 or 5 months, we'll be able to figure out, is this going to be a short-term issue that they talk about that V and we'll come right back very quickly, or is this going to be a longer-term issue? And we'll plan accordingly. But the good news is we're in a position to do that and to do that well. Any other comments? Back to you, George.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. The next item I have on the agenda is the financial report for the month ending April 30th, 2020, which can be found in Exhibit B. Item C, the Legend Group, a 403B provider, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the treasurer that the Legend Group be included as the 403B plan provider for Strongsville City Schools. They have met all the document requirements, which is, it's also part of our negotiated agreements. If we have a certain number of employees interested in one provider and they're under, I believe if we have under 20 providers as a district, that we should bring them on, and they've met those requirements. And then item D, which can be found in Exhibit C, is amendments to the permanent appropriation measure, and it's for one item under Fund 19, Budget Center 9926 for E-ray funding. It's bringing the funds cash level, bringing the funds budget up to the cash levels. And then I also have 2 items under student services under my agenda for North Coast Therapy, for occupational therapy services for the 2020-21 school year, which can be found in Exhibit D, and then item 2, which can be found in E, for North Coast Therapy for their work for extended school year, and both these items are routine services for the fiscal year. And with that, that concludes my report.
Any questions or comments for George?
Thanks.
Dr. Ryba, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Before I get to my agenda items, I just want to provide a few updates to the board and our community for this month's meeting. The first one is on commencement. Earlier today, there was a communication to all of our seniors and their families with some additional details about commencement. This really was wanting to share. We shared where you have 2-hour blocks of reporting time for kids and families. We've broken that down into smaller blocks, so you know exactly if my last name starts with the letter B, I know what time I should show up, so that we can phase folks in and that we keep the process moving to adequately recognize all of our seniors and have our family be a part of it. So there was information in that, as well as senior salute. If you still need a cap and gown, Mr. Collins and Mr. Mueller has said they will be there whatever time is needed to get cords, cap and gowns, et cetera. As is a typical item, there are fees and fines that need to be paid prior to the commencement ceremony, so there was some information on that. After prom, PTA Council has done a lot of work. There's going to be the virtual prom that will be happening next Friday, and some prizes. So thank you, Laura, and all of our PTA members for continuing that on. They're phenomenal prizes, and all kids are entered to win those, and it'll be on your YouTube channel, correct? To be able to tune in and see who the big winner is. And then just as a reminder that we are streaming this event from start to finish. And as we talk about graduates and family members, please know that everybody that is in the area, you are going to be recorded. So we just want folks to know that coming. You will see, whenever we're able to open up our buildings again, you will see signs in a lot of our properties that say you are entering an area that may be live streamed or you may be recorded. So we just wanted to give notice to all of our families that will be occurring on this event. You know, one of the things we were able to do is over the last week, we worked with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health to look at our plan another time and look at how we're staging folks. And so we wanted to be supportive of our families that want to have, maybe have blended families. multiples, whatever the situation may be, grandma, grandpa, siblings. So we were able to up that number to 4 family members as necessary can exit the vehicle to be with the graduates. So what this means, I think this is going to be really cool because this doesn't happen at a normal commencement ceremony. But as a family member, you will get out of the car with your graduate, up to 4. You will hear your graduate's name read. You will process with your graduate as he or she receives their diploma. And then the graduate will continue on. And as we said, there's been a lot of talk about, about a stage. We are outside, so we can't recreate a full stage. And as you take a look at, one of the cool things is seeing the backdrop and seeing the Mustang in the picture. So we can't put kids so high that they look like they're on top of the Mustang. So we want to find a middle ground. And so we have a stage-like experience for our kids where they will go on, they will pose for their picture, they will turn their tassel to the other side, and they will process onward, and then reclaim, I guess, rejoin their family members, and then get their diploma envelope and materials. And in that envelope, we're going to have everything you need. We're going to have programs. If you would have received a letter for Senior Salute, we've got a letter in there. Any recognition, typically in the past, Dr. Smithberger would say, would all of our students that achieve this accomplishment please stand up? They've created an insert to put in all of the envelopes and programs to still recognize the accomplishments of the senior class that will be there. So we're excited about all of that will be happening. And just to have our senior students and families be up to date, we will be sending another communication on May 26th. It will go to everybody, our seniors and their parents, but it is specific directions to our families and seniors so they know exactly what I just said. Once you get out of the car, what do I do, and how do I process, and what is the ceremony plan for me? So we'll share that. And then on Thursday, the 28th, we'll send another email which gives final commencement reminders for all the things we've already shared, as well as we said that would be the deadline to let you know, are we going to Saturday because of rain? Does Saturday and Sunday look like a rain out? And we'll have those plans and we'll be able to share those by Thursday, May 28th. So that's the communication plan that we have moving forward. And those are the updates I wanted to provide the board and the community about commencement right now. And I'll pause to see if there's any questions or additional feedback, because I know we've got 2 board members that are parents and board members and have seniors and are experiencing this firsthand. So anything?
All the board members are parents.
That have seniors.
Anyone? So I just want to publicly, on behalf of the board, thank Cameron, thank his team, thank Mr. Mueller, thank Sean Collins. There's a long list, and we will thank all of them. But what I will share is it's not going to be perfect, but I think it will be a perfect memory. And so that's what I think is important. The day of, I hope everyone enjoys it and makes that memory, because I do think it will be special, and I think it'll be lovely for everyone involved. If we forget something in an envelope, what have you, please be flexible. We will fix whatever we need to fix. But like I said, I think it'll be a perfect memory. So thanks to everyone for their efforts.
Continuing on, I did want to give some updates. This Sunday in my parent update, I provided a survey to get feedback on what the 2020-21 school year looks like. So if you would ask me, what's the most common question, Cameron, you get now? It's, hey, what do you think is going to happen next year? And I really don't know. As you said, we have educated predictions as to what's going to happen, and we're preparing for that. But we're also preparing that these plans need to adjust and adapt sometimes on a daily basis. So, our governor made announcements today about what is able to happen with sports. That can start on Tuesday. We heard it for the first time today like everybody else. And so, we're working on how are we going to communicate with staff? What are we going to share? What timeline do we need to work with the league to get in to say, when can basketball and football and all these sports start to get together? Because the governor and his team released a document and said, you guys are good to go. Well, we're not good to go. And it's not a criticism to everybody's doing the best they possibly can in the situation. But these are things where it takes us some time because it says you can open it up, but you have to have Board of Health approval, and you have to have a plan, and you have to have safety precautions in place. So we're working as quickly as we can. But as we go into this and look to 2021, this is going to be our new reality as things are going to change rapidly. So one of the things that I want to share with the community, and this slide kind of encapsulates the framework or the parameters we have to work within, is that we will have a lot of local decisions. A lot of what's being shared either nationally or throughout the state or locally is guidance documents. But there is one document, and I shared some snippets of it in my parent update, and got confirmation that this is accurate earlier today, that there are health and safety requirements that are a part of the Ohio Department of Education's plan. Right now, there's 11 items that say this is what you have to live under, and those are the rules that, yes, we have local control to say, how do we live under those? But one of those says that all folks on property, whether in a building or on a bus, must wear a face mask at all times. I know that I shouldn't say nobody, a lot of people have concerns about that. Until that changes, that's the parameters we have to work within. You know, right now it says we will maintain a 6 feet distance from other students and adults and so on and so forth. Until that changes, we have to plan for 2021 having a 6 foot distance on school buses, in classrooms, in cafeterias, as we enter or leave the building. So those are rules that we have to follow. And we must adhere to those parameters. And as I've talked about, those parameters will evolve, and so will our plan. So please understand that we're all doing the best we can, but things that I say that may be factual on May 21st may be completely wrong on June 21st, and we will keep you up to date as much as we possibly can. And as Richard says all the time, and I appreciate it, if we all start with positive intentions and practice kindness and compassion and understand that we're finding out the same time as the general public is, then we can move through these and navigate these waters together. One of the things that's also asked of me frequently is, are you advocating on behalf of the city of Strongsville and the kids of Strongsville for reasonable and practical restrictions? And what I want to share with you is, yes, I am. I'm not the type of person that's going to publicly put on Facebook or Twitter, here's the letter I wrote to the governor, or here's the conversation I had with state board members or the state superintendent. I will share that I'm advocating for you, but we also foster positive relationships with legislators and those people in leadership positions to have a great relationship so we can work with them. I know that when I get communication and they include everybody in the world on it, it puts a different spin to it. But if I can work with people in small groups, we can maybe get some headway. So just as a general theme, I have communicated with the governor, his administration, and the state superintendent on multiple occasions about our finances, about commencement, about restrictions that we have in place. We are also a member of a group called the Alliance for High Quality Education, many similar districts to Strongsville across the state. We have conference calls weekly. In the last 2 weeks, we've gone through the 11 restrictions that are in place right now, and we have provided thoughtful feedback and concerns and questions about how do you expect us to implement these restrictions in a practical manner in a school district. Just as an example, you want us to maintain 6 foot social distancing and face masks at all times. Please help me to understand how we do that with 5-year-old kindergartners, or even high schoolers for that matter. And how we run transportation when you're saying at max you can have 1 student per seat. How are we going to do that with available bus drivers and buses and manage it in a time in the city of Strongsville with the traffic that we have? So we are advocating, and instead of me as one individual advocating, we're advocating as a network of almost 100 school districts and 100 superintendents that are communicating with our legislators, communicating and have a seat at the table with weekly meetings with the state superintendent and governor to share these messages and to share these concerns. And so one of the things I would say is if people say, well, does this really work? Well, the graduation requirements that our students now have across the state was the proposal developed and put forth by the Alliance for High Quality Education. So it does work, it has worked, it is working. Because of the relationships we have, but I want everybody to know, and I speak for the board because they advocate on the community's behalf as well, is that we're not just going to sit here and throw our hands up in the air and say, well, it is what it is. We're just going to sit and take it and do the best we can. We're going to continue to advocate and put pressure and ask meaningful questions. But at the end of the day, when the state says you will do this, we have to do that within the parameters that are set, and that's what we're working to do. So, we've sent out a lot of surveys as a school district. This is the most popular survey we've ever sent out. Had 1,200, as of this morning when I put this together, 1,275 parents completed the survey, so obviously it's an important topic, and we greatly appreciate the feedback that was given. And I'll share this in my parent update on this weekend so everybody could see the data. But you can see this is just the breakdown of the percentage and the numbers of parents at each level. So a good representation, heavy at the elementary level, but good overall representation from the district. Preschool, we have about 110 families there, so that's a good number for the preschool. So the most popular, we asked a bunch of questions in this survey, but the most popular one was, we provided 4 options for what school can look like in the fall. And I just want to say this. I know we've provided 4 options that nobody wants. But we have to pick the least offensive of these 4 options or come up with a 5th creative one that we want because as you take a look at 6 feet social distancing, concerns about students moving in the hallways, talk about not having students eat in the cafeteria, talk about students not going at the elementary level to special area classes but staying in a class all day and special areas rotating to them. And if you look at 6 feet social distancing, you're cutting our class sizes in half. So how do we manage that with those restrictions? And so we gave the options of, every child would attend school every day on a half day, kind of like kindergarten. You're going to go in the AM and you're going to go in the PM. Option 2 would be that you attend school every other day. I gave the example of like the middle school, a green-white day. The next option was, and this was what the governor suggested, kind of a 2 days on, 3 days off. It could look a variety of different ways, but, I just suggested one of, we'd have a group that would go Monday and Tuesday. They would do remote learning Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'd have a group that would do Thursday, Friday. They would do remote learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday, the district would be shut down for students. It would be a cleaning, disinfecting day. And the last option was, staggered schedules, shortened days. So we have one grade level coming in at one time, another grade level coming in at another time. And so this just gives the overall votes or feedback from strongly approved to strongly disapproved. But if you break that down into percentages of positive, so what I did is I said strongly approve and approve is a positive rating. I kept neutral as neutral and disapprove and strongly disapprove as a negative rating. So if you take a look, you could see that the 3 options, we could toss out the staggered start, right? Nobody likes the staggered start, that end option, very clear. But the positive rating between the 3 options of half day, every other, or 2 days on, 3 days off, the most popular was 2 days on, 3 days off, but relatively in the same ballpark there. If you add in the neutral, into that positive rating, the trend stays the same, but it bumps it up a little bit, and then I put the negative response there for just as an information point to be explicit about it. So I know you can't see this, and I'm not going to go through it, but I will share it in an email so people can look at it. So we also did this chart by level. So we extrapolated if you're a preschool parent, if you're an elementary, if you're a middle school, a high school, to see were there any differences in these 4 options between the 4 families, or the 4 families, the 4 educational groups. And you could see, yes, there is some differences there, especially at the preschool level. There are some differences in what those preferences are. And you see a little higher rating for the half-day option. Not to put any hypotheses on there, but that's what they're doing now at the preschool level. So that sounds, pretty familiar. And obviously, elementary is a little different, but as you get to the secondary level, the trends hold or get a little more consistent there. We asked, so before I go on, that was the data on the 4 options. Any questions or feedback at this point on that? Okay. So we asked a couple more questions. We said, hey, if there's no vaccine, if there's no change in the spread of COVID as it is right now, would you send your child to the start of the 2020-21 school year So you could see the majority said yes. The no, if you look at the percentage there, it equates to, I think it was like 84 kids that are a no. And then obviously, and I understand unsure, so you've got a percentage of students that are unsure. And then unsure, as you look at the reasons, may not be because of fear of COVID. It may be because of, if you put these restrictions in place, I'm unsure whether I'm going to send my kid to Strongsville City Schools. So I think that's an important distinction when you look at some of the comments that were provided. The other thing we took a look at, and this is a popular question that we get, is are you considering adjusting the calendar? Right now, we're set to start, I think, August 16th, somewhere in that range. You know, would we delay it to September, give us more time to see where we're at? And so 57% said, yeah, they would support that. 43% said yes or no, they would like to keep it the same. But that's going to be a discussion in one of our work groups. One of the areas that we need to work on and understand is that we have specific times that we have all of our staff here. In just another week, about 80% of our staff is going to go on summer break. And we have a lot of staff that are going to come and work in the summer, you know, that aren't scheduled to work to help with this planning. But we have a lot of work to do. Education is going to probably look very differently. And so we've got to take a look at that calendar in coordination with what are adults going to be doing on these calendar days, what are students going to be doing and attending, and how does that all relate to minimum school year. So this is going to be a big topic. If you take a look at the decisions that we need to make right out of the gate very quickly is calendar and structure. And once we decide on calendar and structure, then we have a lot of other decisions underneath that umbrella that are going to be made. So I'd like to thank Michelle Bissell for going through. She's been a great help to me. You know, like I said, 1,275. I think we had a lot of people had comments. 673 comments when she reviewed it for us. So she went through and picked the most popular themes. I can keep going, Michelle, or if you did the work, if you want. Okay, I'll keep going. So these are in rank, or these are the top 5 themes based on the comments, the 600 plus comments that were made, and they are in order of frequency. So when we say number 1, that means it's the most frequent comment that was made. So the most frequent theme is that we should return to school as usual in fall with no restrictions. And if we have restrictions, they so these family members may consider other options. So as I said earlier, and not to repeat myself, we will advocate for meaningful restrictions, practical restrictions, and fair restrictions, but the Department of Health, the governor, and the Ohio Department of Education are going to determine what those are. And we may have a lot of flexibility, we may have limited, so please understand that there's some things that are out of our hands. Number 2, masks are not reasonable. Again, a number of respondents who stated they would consider other schooling options if masks are required. This goes back to, it's one of those rules, you know, if you want to, you know, refer back to rule number 1. Rule number 1 is that there's restrictions, and right now, not making light of it, you know, we have specific guidelines about wearing masks in the district. We've had some growing pains with implementing the mask restrictions, and we're working through those and just building that habit. Folks that have to wear those when they're not alone in an office or alone in a classroom. And so I understand it's difficult for adults. It's insurmountably more difficult for students. But right now, that is one of the 11 restrictions that we have. And until such time as that changes, we have to comply with that. Number 3, proposed options for school structure are impractical for dual income and single parent families. And add on there, what is daycare going to look like? At that time. And I completely understand and empathize, and we're open to suggestions, right? Nobody's got the playbook to say, oh, here's the situation we're in, here's what we're going to do. So we gave 4 options out there, and we continue to collaborate with folks in our school circles in the area and across the state. But I've had a lot of families reach out and say, here's some ideas, please do. Please reach out and let us know what ideas you have. Maybe, you know, I had somebody send me something from other states. You know, they have family in other states, and here's things that they're working on. So send them to us. We understand that it's difficult. It may be impractical for some families. But again, until restrictions are lessened, we have to work within those parameters. Number 4, significant modifications need to be made for 2019-20 remote learning, the remote learning plan if remote learning is to continue next year. We agree. We did the best job we possibly could. I think we did a solid job for March through May. Internally, we talk all the time. What we did in March through May is not good enough for next year if we're in remote learning, and we understand that. We've already started working on options, and we'll continue to work on options of what that will look like and how we can enhance things both on the teacher side as well as the family and the student side. So completely agree. We've got a good foundation, and now we need to build upon that foundation. And number 5, any plan needs to carefully account for students with IEPs, 504s, and other special needs. Absolutely. And I'll highlight a little bit in a minute how we're taking those things into consideration. So I have one more slide to talk about what we're doing, but I wanted to pause to see if there's any questions before I move on. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share, and again, I shared this in the email. It is a little tiny. It'll be shared in the email. I shared it last week with parents, but we have set up a structure, a flow chart for how we're going to make these decisions. When you take a look at what we've just said and completely redesigning an organization, this is not something a small team of people do. And so we've worked on developing what we're calling oversight committees and work groups around the district by level. So preschool will have an oversight committee, and then they'll have work groups, and those work groups say that there will be an educational programming work group, and there'll be a building operation. So just as a quick example, educational program means what does remote learning look like? How are we going to take care of the needs of our students with disabilities or 504s, our students that are English language learners? What technology do we need to make this work? Building operations mean how are we going to get the kids off the bus and into the building? How are we going to handle recess? How are we going to handle lunch? How are we going to handle disinfection of surfaces and barriers and things of that nature? That's the operations piece. So these work groups are going to be tasked with answering a set of questions and giving recommendations to that oversight committee. That oversight committee is going to provide approval of those, and when they provide approval, feedback, modifications, but when they provide approval, that district oversight committee is going to come in and say, yes, you're okay to move on. And what we've shared with our staff is, we don't want you to wait until the end to give us one holistic, beautiful plan. If you figure out how cafeteria is going to run in the elementary school, send it on up the chain and let's make sure it's okay and it works. So in these work groups, though, we need all stakeholders. So we have administration, we have board members, we have support staff, we have teachers in this, and we also have parents. So we asked parents in this survey, would you like to be a part of these work groups? We had over 400 parents said they wanted to participate in these work groups. Phenomenal response. But we're not going to be able to accommodate 400 people on these work groups. We are going to have parents, and you're a crucial part of it, but again, you have to give Michelle credit. She had a great idea. And what we're going to do to expand that is we did this with the levy campaign a few years ago. We did like the 9+9. And so how can we expand these groups that are going to be 12 to 15, somewhere in that range? Well, what if every member of that group creates a network, a circle of 10 friends that I can go in between meetings and say, hey, this is what we talked about, this is where we're going next time, targeted bullet points and questions, what feedback do you have on these 3 things? So if we have a group of 15 people and each of them have a friend focus group circle of 10, we've now extrapolated to 150 people that are giving feedback on one of these work groups. So that's the direction that we've given to our building administrators and building teams that are building these work groups. We had a draft membership that was reviewed last week. Next week, the final membership, next Wednesday, membership will be finalized. And then they will start to reach out and set meeting dates to get moving in getting these work groups going and providing recommendations on what school will look like. So as Mr. Micko mentioned at the beginning, we have work groups starting up and we'll provide answers to these questions. This is the structure that we're using. And as I said multiple times, whether you're on a work group or not, whether you're in these friend focus group circles or not, we want your feedback. We need your feedback. If you email me, I've spent a lot of time catching up on some email today. I've sent it to the people that are leading the focus groups. So it will get to the right hands. If you don't know who's leading them, get it to me and I'll get it to the right people. Just wanted to give I would say brief, but I don't think it was very brief. But an update on a lot of information that we've collected in the last 4 or 5 days and kind of how that's working to help as our plan as we move forward. So any other thoughts by the board members or questions that I can answer at this time?
So shout out to Michelle for all the work. We really appreciate it. I will share, just to kind of summarize, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's anything, a lot of times what we read and what we see in the public, everybody has an agenda, everybody has a side, and it's about being right or wrong or what have you. We have a national election coming up, and everything that's going on in the pandemic seems to be a proxy for that, or vice versa. Speaking for myself, speaking for the district, we have an agenda. It's a defined agenda, and that's to do right by our students and our parents. And, whether it's masks, whether it's impractical or what have you, we're going to advocate as well as we can for our students. I've been struggling with the idea of, when's it going to go back to normal? When are we going to have normal education? And ultimately, I decided that word doesn't serve us well. And the word I've been using is, we want our education to be as much as regular as it can be. The most ideal thing for us is to be able to have kids get on buses, go to school, be with their teachers. At the end of the day, get on that bus, go home, be with their family. That's regular. We're going to be prepared. We can't predict the future. We can't predict the exact flavor of it. But with this worker group, with everybody being involved, with everybody sharing their ideas and working towards that common goal, we will be prepared as well as we possibly can be. And come fall, whether it's August, whether it's September, what have you, come fall, we will be prepared. For my purpose, it doesn't do a whole lot of good to argue, is this the right approach? Is this, is Columbus being too restrictive? Is Columbus being not restrictive enough? We will be prepared to do the best we can to deliver the best education we can for our students as safely as possible. And I want to make sure everyone understands our agenda is to be successful with our students. So if that means, being quiet with Columbus, but working a back channel to get a practical result, we'll do that. If that means advocating with a press release, we'll do that. But our goal, our agenda is to do what's in the best interest of our students' education. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Micco. We have 2 items for your vote under my section tonight. Full-day kindergarten tuition reimbursement be resolved upon my recommendation that due to the COVID-19 closure, a credit reimbursement of full-day kindergarten tuition be issued for 20 days rounded up to the nearest 10th dollar, not to exceed $250 per student.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? George, do you want to just give us a little bit of commentary on how we got to the number?
Yeah, so we came to the number is, we started with the preschool tuition. So the preschool tuition, our baseline, there was 1 month, and 1 month of the 9 months equated to 11%. So then we looked at the kindergarten tuition, and we applied that same methodology of the 1 month, and took 11% of the kindergarten tuition, which equated to about $242, and we rounded up to, we took the number of school days, 11%, and it equated to about 20 school days. And then we took a per diem per day, and then we multiplied it out by the 20 days and got to 242, and we rounded it to 250 for an even number. So our baseline is consistent with preschool.
Thank you, George. Any other questions? Take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell,
Yes.
Mr. Micco.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next, a memorandum of understanding. Be it resolved, the recommendation that the memorandum of understanding between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Strongsville Education Association as stated in the exhibit be accepted as stated in Exhibit F.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Like everything, we have to have agreements, and I do want to thank all of our teachers, and as represented by the board, the Strongsville Education Association, but I want to thank everyone for their efforts. It's reasonable. It's in the best interest of our students. Hearing no other conversation.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to business services, we have one item. Be it resolved, my recommendation that the Board of Education accepts the proposal of Guarantee Trust Life Insurance Company through Love Insurance Company as the student insurance program for the Strongsville City Schools for the 2020-21 school year. Be it resolved further that all students participating in interscholastic and intramural activities shall either purchase the appropriate insurance coverage or present a waiver signed by the parent and guardian. Such waiver shall release all in authority or in charge from any liability resulting from medical claims as stated in Exhibit G.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Hausum, second by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? George, can you just, this is for students who choose to buy this
Correct.
if they don't have
Insurance.
other insurance.
Right, it's an optional insurance for the student athletes, or as a student. I think it's just for students, sorry.
Interscholastic and intramural activities.
Right.
Any other questions? George, take the roll.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to curriculum, the first item is a correction, and this is a correction the board has previously approved. We were supposed to have a trip go to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland this June. Obviously, that's been changed based on the pandemic, and so we're updating. It's that same exact trip, no additional cost to our families, and they have moved those dates from June 4th to 15th of this summer to June 17th through 28th of 2021. Under number 2 is an Inmentum contract. Inmentum courseware is a program that we utilize to provide online educational services for credit recovery or other courses to help support our students. We started the Strongsville Academy, 3-4 years ago. This will help continue that for the next 3 years. So it'll be utilizing credit recovery for the Strongsville Academy programs. The total cost is $66,879, which will be broken down into 3 payments of $22,293. As we look at items 3 through 6 on the agenda, we've read that with the board in my weekly update. We have, every year we have to update our handbooks. So we have our early learning preschool handbook, elementary, middle school, and high school handbook. The only handbook that is still out there is the athletic handbook. We just needed a little more time to finalize that one, so that will probably be on the upcoming June agenda. Number 7 is a student-teacher agreement that we entered into agreement with a student-teacher agreement between Baldwin Wallace and Strongsville City School District to be approved as presented in Exhibit H. And then moving on from there, that we accept a student-teacher from Baldwin Wallace to be with Vicki White in the math department at the high school on the dates listed. Questions on the curriculum report?
I was just going to share that I did read the middle school and the high, I read all of them, but I read the middle school and the high school planners, and it might be interesting over the next year to revisit those in light of the remote learning, in light of the reliance on technology, et cetera, and see whether they make as much sense in our newer world.
That's good feedback. Thank you, Mr. Miko. Ms. Pelko, she oversees that with the building administration, so she'll take care of that. Going on student services, we do have one item. Be it resolved upon my recommendation that the Board of Education enters into an agreement with Solutions Behavior Consulting to provide behavioral intervention services for students with disabilities for extended school year, as shown in Exhibit I. And I would like to mention that, Mr. Trujillo has done a wonderful job. We've got approval. Extended school year is a program that we provide to students that qualify, that have individualized education plans. They have a meeting around this time, and they look at, are students showing regression, or is it taking longer for them to recoup skills after breaks? So the breaks that we've had this year is the summer break from the last summer break, as well as the break from winter break. We did not ever come back from a spring break this year or a break due to the pandemic, so that can't be considered. But based on the stay-at-home order, there was a carve-out for targeted educational programming services. So this will be an in-person program, and we've gotten approval from the Board of Health for this, and I think as of yesterday, we were the only program that's gotten approval from the Board of Health to have this in-person program. So I think we'll probably have about 40 students that will have the option to partake in it. So I appreciate the work that Andy and his department has done. And now we come to the Human Resource Report with our Assistant Superintendent, Jenny Pelko. Jenny?
Thank you, Dr. Ryba. As Mr. Micco stated at the beginning of the meeting, I do want to take a minute and recognize our retirees. Although we've had them in the agenda already, we normally would recognize them this evening at our May meeting, and unfortunately, due to obviously the circumstances, we're pushing that back to our June 25th board meeting with the hopes that at least maybe they can come in with their family and be recognized. But that being said, not all of them are able to attend that, so I just wanted to publicly recognize them, take a few minutes here and recognize all of them collectively. So administratively, we have Mr. Joe Mueller. He is our current high school principal. Although he only served 1 year with us, he's been in education for 45 years total, and finally officially retiring this year. So we thank him for his leadership over the last year with us. As far as teachers go, we have Denise Abood, a kindergarten teacher at Whitney. She's served here for 15 years. Mrs. Sharon Baker, English teacher at the middle school, 27 years. Eve Hollander, Title I teacher at Chapman, 6 years with us. Kathy Jordan, science teacher at the middle school, 30 years with us. Pat Cook, music teacher at Chapman, 22 years. Chris Rafe, first grade teacher at Chapman, 36 years for Christine. Karen Sherwood, gifted intervention at Kinsner Elementary, 18 years. Patty Stakes, third grade teacher at Whitney, 41 years. Jody Thome, first grade teacher at Sarar, 12 years. And then for our non-certificated staff, Mr. Gary Adler, athletic custodian at the high school, 16 years. Sue Barris, bus driver, 28 years. James Blagg, custodian at Maraski, 14 years. Deb Bierman, special education aide at the preschool for 21 years. Deborah French, bus driver, 29 years. Donna Gehrig, special education aide at the high school, 29 years. Elaine Hamrick, media assistant at Chapman, 35 years for Elaine. James Harrison, bus driver, 9 years. Susan Kerr, clerk at the high school, 25 years. Denise Casella, custodian at the middle school, 24 years. Michael Koopman, bus driver, 9 years. Vicki Luschek, educational aide at the middle school, 21 years. Harry Matlock, bus driver, 10 years. Diane Rodehaver, transportation secretary for 33 years. Donna Tursky, data input at the high school, 23 years. John Wagner, custodian at the high school for 30 years. And if I added correctly, that's 564 years of experience that we're going to be losing in our district. And I recognize that many of them may have served in different capacities throughout the years as well, but those were their current positions that I read. And for those that are able to attend on June 25th, I'll go into more detail about their service and thank them again. But I just want to congratulate all of our retirees. So. All right, and with that, I will start my report. So under Human Resources this evening, I have the following items for your consideration. We have under E1, the abolishments of non-certificated staff members. Under E2, non-renewal of contracts for our certificated substitutes. And these are our contracts that are long-term substitutes that we don't renew at the end of the year. Under E3, appointments for certificated summer school. We have 2 summer school teachers that will oversee our remediation courses through Plato. Appointments for non-certificated summer school for a clerk. Continuing under E3, we have the appointment of a certificated staff member, and appointments for non-certificated staff members. These are our onboard instructors. Under E4, changes in status for certificated full-time equivalent. Change in status for certificated recall from reduction in force status. We have changes in status for non-certificated reduction in force. Under E5, job share for certificated staff members at Maraski Elementary. Under E6 are our contract recommendations for the year. For our administrative team, we have a 2-year contracts, 3-year contracts. Contract recommendations for our certificated staff, these are continuing contract recommendations. And continuing contract recommendations for limited contracts, certificated. We have 1-year limited contract effective for 2021 school year. We have 2-year limited contracts for 2021 school year and 21-22, and then 3-year limited contracts for 2021, 21-22, and 22-23. Contract recommendations for leadership. We have a 1-year contract and then 3-year contract recommendations. Under E7, we have stipends for our local professional development committee, stipend for our summer curriculum development out of the general fund, and then we also have a stipend for our summer curriculum development that is out of our Title IIA Improving Teacher Quality Fund. Under E8, we have leave for disability for non-certificated staff. Under E9, medical leave for certificated staff, medical leaves for non-certificated staff, and under E10, unpaid leaves for non-certificated staff. And that concludes my report unless you have any questions for me.
Jenny, if you can just update a little bit. I know we abolished some positions, but that's more due to a reorganization to increase efficiency and effectiveness of the employees and evolve our human resources. So if you can just highlight that quickly for the board and the community.
Yeah, so that was under my E1 for abolishments for non-certificated staff. So basically, how the contract works for our OPSI staff is you have to kind of abolish a position and then recreate a position under the contract. And so one of the things that I will give, kudos to our operations manager, Mr. Stephen Breckner. He has looked at our custodians that are assigned to athletics, as well as our truck driver, and tried to reorganize the work that they're doing and created 2 new job descriptions. So we are going to recreate an assistant maintenance, 2 assistant maintenance positions out of that. So we abolished the 2 custodians assigned to athletics and will recreate assistant maintenance. So what that means is they'll be able to do a little bit more. They will still take care of our athletic facilities and the grounds, but they will also be able to help in the maintenance department. And, for the people that get that position, learn some new skills and be able to assist our maintenance department, who's done a phenomenal job here in our district. As far as the truck driver goes, we'll replace that with an event custodian. So instead of having an athletic custodian, we'll have an event. So that person can prepare the internal or the inside of the buildings. So if we have a volleyball game, basketball game, they'll be in charge of preparing that. As well as if we have other, custodians maybe that aren't there and are sick or call off or whatever, they could also do other duties within the building to cover those things. So it's really gonna save on overtime. It's going to just, again, have a more efficient operation of the things that we do. So those are those positions. Many of them are, the rest of them actually have to do with classroom aides. And so 2 of the positions had some older titles, and since we redid the contract with OPSI the last time, we created our aides in different categories. So now not every special education aide has the exact same job description. So 2 of them were title replacements. And one of them had 6.75 hours. It was the only aide that was 6.75. So we wanted that more in line with what we have, so we made that a 6.5 and then changed that title just to the MM aide that we currently have, so it mirrors the contract. The second one, again, going to replace it with an MM or an MI aide at the middle school. So we're just, same positions, we're just flipping the titles there. And then there were some needs, so we evaluated with the special education department. We have MI aides, and then we have MIs with RBTs. And so when you have that RBT endorsement, what that means is it's somebody that specializes in behaviors and able to help students that may be exhibiting some challenging behaviors and can work with them one-on-one. And there's a lot of training that's involved with that. And so based on our needs for this upcoming year, we found that we don't necessarily need that at Chapman. We have enough coverage there, but we needed it at Sarar. So we looked at, retirements of people and kind of just shifting those things around. So we're shifting an RBT from Chapman over to Sarar, and then creating just an MI aide at Chapman. And then kind of the same thing with the high school. We had an MI aide at the high school, but found that we didn't need that, so we recreated that position at the middle school where the needs are. So just getting into really the details of what we truly need, and they're not new positions per se, but replacing things and making everything more efficient.
And so just to wrap up the conversation, this is the weedsy stuff that Jenny's department gets into, but if you take a look at our board agenda, there's a recommendation for solutions behavioral consulting. Prior to training and building our own pool of special education aides that are registered behavior technicians, that's what RBT stands for, we had to pay to bring in outside employees for that service because we didn't have the capacity built in our district. So even though we still need that support because of the scope of needs that we have, the cost that we have with solutions behavior consulting have decreased because we've built our own employee force that has those skills and services for a more effective rate than it would be if we contracted with an outside service. So those two things kind of go hand in hand in the agenda, and is ultimately providing great service to our students that have behavioral needs at a reduced cost to the district because we're able to have that internally provided rather than contracted out.
If I may just throw in a couple extra comments. We need to, the language is the language. You abolish a position, you add a position. We're still following that guideline of being very cautious with our staffing levels until we understand what's going on. It's important to thank not just Jenny and Steve, but also Paul and his leadership. Paul takes pride in, with the OPSI group, and so I want to make sure we thank Paul for that, because there was some conversation. It had to be agreed by both sides, but Paul has always come that all of the OPSI employees are here to do the best they can for our students, and I think it's not just the dollars and cents of shifting from behavioral consulting to internal staff. We all know those jobs are demanding jobs. We also know those jobs require heart and care, and I'd rather have internal people that I know are devoted to that job. So it's I hate the phrase, but it is a win-win.
It is. For the last section under my report, technology. Typically, representatives of the technology department come in and share this, so you're going to have to bear with me this time. But the overarching three items are that we get E-rate funding. E-rate funding is a reimbursement program we get based on the dollars we spend towards different technology platforms in the district. And so we can utilize those dollars towards these purchases. So if you take a look at, it says in the agenda for each of these that it's part general fund, part E-rate funding. So it's about 2/3 E-rate funding, which means reimbursements, non-taxpayer dollars. About 1/3 of it is general fund dollars. So I will stay out of the techie language and just kind of give you the way that I understand it. And Richard, you could jump in if I say anything incorrectly. So the first project they want to use these dollars for is to replace our district firewall. It's getting older, and we need to bolster that. So that first one is be resolved upon my recommendation to approve agreement between CHI Corporation and the district to replace the district firewall. This includes equipment, professional services, and premium support at a cost of $29,572, subject to E-rate discount as found in Exhibit J. So that's the firewall, that's security of our network. Number two is about access points. One thing we hear from our high school kids is we can never get on the Wi-Fi, or, it's slowing down. So what this is doing is we have different, because the high school renovations, we have different companies that have different access points. So what this one is doing is it is getting the high school for all on the same Wi-Fi platform, the same, in my layman terms, the same hub for the router, the Wi-Fi. I'm struggling here, Rich. It sounds like I know what I'm talking about.
It's the same cell job I use.
Thank you. So is getting the same equipment in the high school, and then it's also preparing we're going to prepare 3 elementary schools by running the new cabling to have the new access points available. So for number 2, be it resolved upon the recommendation that we approve an agreement between Southwest Security and the Strongsville City Schools to replace and configure all access points at Strongsville High School, provide training and perform a wireless survey of high school after installation, and replace all cabling at 3 elementary schools at the cost of $119,649.50, subject to E-rate discount as found in Exhibit K. The last one here is about bandwidth. So we want to prepare, right now we have 1 gig of bandwidth. We want to prepare to have increased bandwidth, and to do that, we need to have better switches to handle this. So this is buying some new switches, and then we'll use the old switches and put those to replace some switches that are in worse position than those are. So be it resolved upon the recommendation that we approve an agreement between TTX Teletronics and the Strongsville City Schools to upgrade switches to multi-gigabyte Ethernet ports at a cost of $85,824, subject to E-rate discount as found in Exhibit L. And Mr. Micko, you can go and correct everything I've just said.
You did David gave you good notes.
Thank you. He
So
did.
You did a nice job. I'll just, enjoying the technology. This is important. I mean, whether we're remote learning, a hybrid, or back to regular education, the technology continues to become important for us to do the job that we're doing. Just from a practical standpoint, these are big ticket items. If we don't use the E-rate dollars, we lose the E-rate dollars, and that would be a shame. So we need the technology upgrades. We always need to stay current to do our job well, and it makes sense when we can to use other funds. In this case, the E-rate federal funds to pay for that. Did anybody else have any other questions on this?
And with that, that concludes my report.
Any general questions regarding Dr. Ryba's report? Moving on, we have myself with the report on Polaris Career Center. I want to give a couple of shout-outs. The Strongsville Middle School, along with some of the other middle schools in the Polaris Consortium, received the Project Lead the Way Distinguished School Gateway certification or recognition for 2019-2020. To get that recognition, we need to offer at least 1 gateway course at the middle school, have 50% of the student body participating, have 25% of the students advancing to high school and participate in units at the high school, and then have strategies in place that support making sure that we are allowing the Project Lead the Way program regardless of race, ethnicity, poverty, gender, et cetera. But we want to make sure that everyone's taking advantage of that. But we're all very proud of the middle school program and how well the middle school takes advantage of that program. So congratulations to them. 90 Polaris students were inducted into the National Technical Honor Society. which is the highest award for excellence in career and technical education. To qualify, you need to have earned all A's in your Polaris program. You needed to maintain a 95% or higher attendance rate, and you needed to maintain a 3.0 cumulative grade point average for Polaris in your home school district. And I'd like to give a few shout outs. If I mess up any names, just email me so the next time I recognize you, I can do it right. Caitlin DeBow, Maria Dydick, Tyler Houghton, Alexandria Kimmel, Margaret Miko, Ryan Nelson, Jesse Stiles, Lilia Sivdenik, and in our engineering program, shout out to Matthew Budney, Jacob Koschel, Nicholas Maramburga, Rohan Patel, Alexia Scarvelli, Julia Spicer, Seth Welch, Matthew Williams, and Cameron Wolf. So we're proud of all of you, and congratulations to all of you. And then my last shout out is for our business professionals program at Polaris. They managed to have a virtual contest, which is very important to the Polaris program, is the different kinds of contests, whether it be at the culinary contest or the industrial trades program. But the Business Professionals of America have a skills contest, which is primarily computer programs and administrative accounting type things. And I'm proud to announce that Kevin Weeder, who's a senior at our high school, received first place for advanced word processing. So I wanted to congratulate Kevin. If you remember when we visited Polaris, Kevin was one of the students who showed us his program and was a great ambassador not only for the high school, but Polaris in general. So we congratulate him and we wish him well. And that completes the Polaris Career Center report. Next is report on legislation. Obviously, COVID-19 and the pandemic is occupying everyone's attention in Columbus, in Strongsville, in the country, and in the world. I did notice that the state senate had some hearings about what we're going to do with education come fall. Lots of different people were at the State House giving testimony on what we should do or how we should do that safely. I do want to give a shout out to Senator Matt Dolan, who's the head of that committee, and thank him for all of his leadership. He has been doing yeoman's work protecting our interests. So if you get a chance, please thank Matt. And that concludes my report on legislation. Board liaison reports. Do we want to start with Michelle?
Sure. As Dr. Ryba mentioned earlier, we know that things are changing daily, so what I'm going to cover covers all the month of May. There were 2 meetings for City Council on May 4th and then on May 18th, so some of the things have already been outdated, but I'm just going to let you know kind of where they stand. So at the May 4th meeting, they let everybody know that a lot of the rec employees had been furloughed, which comes as no surprise as the rec center is closed. But now that things are starting to open again, they're in current process of how do we get this back going and rolling and get those employees back to work. So that changed rather dramatically in the month. Similarly, but this is more recent, at this past meeting, they announced that they're going to have to give a 20% reduction in salary to some of the bargaining units. That is not finalized yet. It was being finalized this week. But you should know that the city council members and the mayor also took that 20% cut to stand with those people that have had some setbacks right now. Also in the community, you may have heard most of these things already. There won't be any fireworks this summer. The Rib Burn-Off has been canceled, and all the rec-sponsored summer activities have been canceled at this time. And the final piece of report comes from Southwest General. The Gordon Short works with Southwest and brings news from them to City Council, so I'm bringing it also to you, particularly in this time as COVID is rampant. And we should note too that Southwest has things under control. We have got the numbers to where they're manageable. So they have currently tested 470 people for COVID. 80 of those were confirmed positive, 15 deaths total, and only 5 employees have tested positive. So all around their numbers are in a place where they can serve our community at capacity. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Laura?
The Education Foundation postponed their meeting this month. I haven't heard when that's been rescheduled to. And the PTA is just gearing up for the virtual senior night tomorrow night. PTAs all give scholarships out to our graduating seniors. So we'll be doing that. And then at 11 p.m., we will be doing our virtual after prom, where we will be handing out 25 prizes to our seniors. So tune into our YouTube channel to see if you're a winner. That concludes my report.
Seth, did you have any, are you on? Yes, do you have any
Student achievement.
reports, Seth?
Yes. The OSBA Student Achievements are going to hold regional meetings in the month of June, so I'm going to jump on one of those and kind of learn everything that's going on there. And want to give a shout out to our DECA team. They had 17 people placed in the top 10, which is fantastic, and have a couple names to read off here. So, like Richard said, I apologize if I get them wrong. You can email me, and I'll do better next time. But Claire Abdallah got first place in quick service restaurant management. Samantha McNabb got second place in automotive management. And Manav Patel got third place in marketing communications. Again, there was 17 total that were in the top 10, so congratulations to that group. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Seth. That was a great first report. I look forward
Thank
to
you.
more great reports. Board committee reports. All of our next meetings are to be announced. Does anybody have any board committee comments or reports? Hearing none. Consent calendar, action by the Board of Education and adoption of consent calendar at this point of the agenda means that all items appearing in this agenda with asterisks are adopted by a single motion unless requested otherwise. Do I have any requests? Hearing none, I don't believe we had any corrections, so that was a good thing. Congratulations. Any, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Cameron, you were so concise today. Do you have any other comments?
With that intro, yes, I do. But we've talked a lot about it. We know about virtual prom. We've talked about that. We've talked about the upcoming dates for commencement. Just wanted to put a few reminders in this last week as we go for remote learning. So specifically for our high school and middle school students, they did have an opportunity. Remember, if they did 50% of the work, their grade from March 12th would either remain the same or increase if they did some work. So all work for preschool on up to high school is due Sunday, May 24th. We will continue to accept late work until the time report cards or grades are finalized at the secondary level, but we ask that all of our families submit any work that's still outstanding by that time or work that was assigned this week. For this upcoming week, I've shared this in an email to our parents, but this upcoming week is a little different. We understand that I'm a parent of two boys, and we are all getting done with remote learning, mentally and with the actual work that's being assigned. But May 26th, this is meant to be a low-key, fun, take a look at it this next week if you want to utilize it into the summer. But all of our classes, except our senior classes, that are senior only, will provide work on the website again for our families. Nothing will be required to be submitted. Teachers will be available for office hours as needed, so I know some do Google Meets. They're not going to be there at this time, so if you need to talk with your teacher, just send an email and they'll be able to get with you because we're using them to do other work in the district that's needed to wrap up the school year. But we also want to note for our elementary families, it's not going to be the tic-tac-toe boards. It's not going to be district-wide. Your child's building and teachers have put together these end-of-year activities for you. So if you still go to the same remote learning website, we'll have links to drive you to the individual building pages. Or if you go to Whitney Elementary or Sarrar Elementary, there'll be a link there that says, here's to see the week of May 26 activities. So have fun, take a look, utilize them this week or into the summertime. And for those, we did have a lot of families ask, are we keeping especially the tic-tac-toe boards up all summer? That website will be up all summer, so if you want to do some enrichment activities with your kids, you can do that. So May 29th, that's officially our last day of school. Teachers will have their grade books finalized, so parents can go into the PASS system and see nothing for our preschool and elementary families. But for middle school and high school, you could see that final third quarter grade, which will officially close, and for high school students, that final 18-week or second semester grade, which will close at that time. And you can also see if your child did not complete the required work, you'll see an I, which means incomplete. And our staff has been communicating and on the phone and talking with families throughout the last week and a half to address and support the work that needs to be done. So you'll either see the letter grade or you'll see an I, and you should have, here's what I need to complete by this deadline to change that I to my letter grade. And then finally, Monday, June 1st, report cards will be published in the PASS system for families to view. And that is the timely information for today.
Excellent. And I will just comment, like at the elementary school, this would be Spirit Week. This would be all of that stuff. So it'll be virtual. I've heard some people say it's not going to count. I'm done. I'm not even going to check into it. But definitely at least check into it. It'll be memory making of type activities. Board of Education other. Do we want to start with Michelle?
Nothing.
Good.
I do have one other. And if I can quickly get it up to, there it is. So Monday is Memorial Day, and I did want to at least acknowledge the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice those in the military made for us. But where did it go? So on May 31st, 1982, President Reagan had this to say at Arlington National Cemetery: "The United States and the freedom for which it stands, the freedom for which they died, must endure and prosper. Their lives remind us that freedom is not bought cheaply. It has a cost, it imposes a burden. And just as they whom we commemorate were willing to sacrifice, so too must we, in a less final, less heroic way, we be willing to give of ourselves." And I think that's a nice sentiment for Memorial Day, and I think that's a nice sentiment for the work we're going to do over the summer. We must be willing to give of ourselves to do what's best for our students. Hearing any others? Hearing none, I wish everyone a nice weekend and a good Memorial Day and a start to the summer. We are going to switch back to the agenda. Meeting notification: a regular Board of Education meeting work session will be held Thursday, June 4th, 7 p.m. in the meeting room right here at the Cook Avenue Admin Building. And we also have a regular Board of Education meeting on June 25th, also in this building. We do have reason for executive session, Cameron?
To consider matters required to be kept confidential by law, and to consider the employment and appointment of a public employee or official.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, second by Mrs. Hausum. Any discussion?
I just have a question.
Of course.
I recall one of you telling me there were 4 items. We just listed 2, so did
They
something
fall
change?
under those.
They do.
They do
Okay.
fall. under
Or
those.
items under 2 reasons.
Under
Very
2
good.
reasons.
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, the roll.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hausum?
Yes.
Mrs. Bissell?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes. We will go into executive session at 8:45. Once again, have a good Memorial Day. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane. Thank you.